Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. It is Wednesday, and there is a lot to talk about, starting with this. Let's talk about this Graham Platner controversy. Right? If you don't know Platner, he's a Democratic candidate in Maine's Senate race. He's kind of blown up online as of late, has raised millions and millions of dollars, but he's now found himself in a predicament. And it stems from this video that's now been widely seen from the Pod Save America podcast. And in it, you can see he has a tattoo, and it looks a lot like a Totenkopf for a death's head. Yes, technically, the death's head has existed in German military traditions for much longer than the Nazis, but ever since World War II and its use among SS divisions, it's been exclusively associated with them. And with that, you have Platner claiming that he got this tattoo back in 2007 while in the Marine Corps and on leave in Croatia, and that one night he got drunk and decided to get a skull and crossbones tattoo without ever realizing that the one that he got was, or at the very least, is very similar to the Nazi symbol. With him also claiming that he only recently learned about the resemblance, made plans to get it removed, and that also despite multiple government agencies taking a look at it. So for example, he joined the army and they check all tattoos for any possible hate symbols, and apparently they didn't have any issue with it. With Platner also adding there, I also passed a full background check to receive a security clearance to join the ambassador to Afghanistan security detail. And with all of that, as of yesterday, it appears that he has gotten the tattoo covered up, with him telling reporters, going to a tattoo removal place is going to take a while. I wanted this thing off my body. And so you have all of that's playing out, but also it's not the only thing that's been playing out, because it seems like whoever is doing the opposition research here has been doing their job. Because in addition to the tattoo situation, there's also been a controversy around his old Facebook and Reddit posts. Posts and or questions around Black people's tipping habits, mocking rural Americans and dismissing military sexual assaults. And regarding that first thing, he said on Pod Save America,
I was legitimately asking the question. I mean, that was the point of the thread, was to ask the question. Amusingly enough, I remember this time when I had first started bartending, and then I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was Black, who was a bartender, who did a great job of walking me through structural injustice and the fact of feelings of lack of agency. There were a whole bunch of reasons, and after that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense. It was certainly not meant as a malicious thing.
With Platner later adding, that one, I must say, I was legitimately curious. Right, and that is, you had Platner trying to explain his past comments, saying they were made during a dark time in his life after leaving the army, and he was still suffering the effects of PTSD. But also regarding his past and who he is now, you had him telling the AP, I don't look at this as a liability. I look at this as a life that I have lived, a journey that has been difficult, that has been full of struggle, that has also gotten me to where I am today. I'm very proud of who I am. And all in all, this has been a very interesting situation to watch play out, because depending on where you go online, vastly different reactions. Right? Some saying they outright don't buy his story, they have questions, they're skeptical, some calling for him to back out. One of his biggest critics actually seems to be his former political director, Genevieve McDonald, who claims that Platner knew what the tattoo was and wrote, Graham has an anti-Semitic tattoo on his chest. He's not an idiot, he's a military history buff. Maybe he didn't know it when he got it, but he got it years ago and he should have had it covered up because he knows damn well what it means. But that also is, you have a lot of people out there believing his story, talking about growth and human change. But as far as how this is going to play out, we'll have to wait to see. You know, Platner still right now says that he plans to run, and he has the endorsement of Senator Bernie Sanders, at least as of recording this video. Right, and all of this is, of course, it's still primary season, and he's going to be up against two-term Governor Janet Mills. Right, and then whoever wins the primary, they'll go up against Senator Susan Collins. Yeah, for now, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. And in the meantime, I would really love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here, especially, not limited to, but especially if you live in Maine. Because that's the big thing about elections. Really, it's only your opinion in this specific situation that matters. For the rest, it might affect like who or who isn't donating, public conversation, but that's noise, that's dollars, and then there's the vote. And so right now, I'm very interested to see what polls might say in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. But then next up, we've got to talk about RFK Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again movement. Again, because it sparked a lot of debate and focus at the federal level, but maybe even more substantial as far as impact, it could be on the state level. And I say that as and because there's this AP investigation that found more than 400 pieces of anti-science legislation being introduced in state houses across the country this year alone. And we're talking about legislation based on conspiracy theories like fluoride in drinking water being used to poison the population, pasteurization making milk less nutritious and only really benefiting the dairy industry, and vaccines killing people. Right? And of those 400 plus, anti-vax bills were the most common. About 350 pieces of legislation that were introduced came at vaccines from different angles. Things like creating the criminal offense of vaccine harm, requiring blood banks to test for evidence of vaccinations, and instituting a 48-hour vaccine waiting period, just to name a few things. Now that said, most of these bills, they haven't taken hold. Only 26 of those have been adopted in 11 different states. But it also doesn't mean that there aren't people at risk in places where herd immunity is compromised. Right in there, you had the AP pointing to 8-year-old Liam Dahlberg of Indiana, who died from a vaccine-preventable disease earlier this year. And according to his parents, Liam was vaccinated against HIB, but the other kids in his community weren't, or because the HIB vaccine is not required for kids entering public schools in Indiana. And you had doctors saying Liam, who was particularly vulnerable because of his severe asthma, likely picked up HIB from an unvaccinated kid, then causing his brain to swell and then killing him less than 2 days after he complained of a headache. And with that, you had Liam's father, Eric, saying, I thought having the vaccines would protect our children. Unfortunately, it did not, because other kids, other adults, need to be vaccinated as well in order order for it to work. And so now you have these parents having to grieve the loss of their son while also ensuring that their other children, one of whom also has severe asthma, remain safe in a county with low immunization rates. With that, you had Liam's mom, Ashley, saying, "There's no pain that is worse than the pain of losing a child. I do not and can't live through the loss of another." Though again, this is not just about vaccines. The AP also found 70 pieces of legislation proposing a ban on fluoride in public drinking water, as well as expanding access to raw milk. And again, only a few of those have taken hold, but there is still potential for causing serious harm. In the case of raw milk, you see things like a California mom buying some for her toddler after seeing a wellness influencer share a video of RFK Jr. taking shots of it. And then after looking around online, she said she found a homesteader selling what they called clean and tested raw goat's milk. With her daughter, Brooklyn, being hospitalized and nearly dying after drinking it, suffering 3 cardiac arrests and winding up on dialysis and a ventilator before turning a corner. And even now, this little girl, she has high blood pressure and walks with a limp. And so with that, you had Brooklyn's mom saying that making raw milk more available is dangerous. Saying, quote, "You're going to have the average mom like me that thinks they've done their research, think they're doing something to help their baby and end up hurting their baby." Right? And with all this, the organizations and the people pushing these causes, they can often be traced back to RFK Jr. himself. You have most of the bills also being supported by at least one of 4 national groups connected to him, where with those 4 being Make America Healthy Again, Action, Stand for Health Freedom, the National Vaccine Information Center, and the Weston A. Price Foundation. And many of their arguments rely on the premise of staying healthy naturally and rejecting the idea that these proposed laws are based on conspiracy theories. But again, that's in the face of the extensive scientific evidence contradicting their causes. Right? Vaccines have saved the lives of more than 150 million people since 1974. You've got millions of foodborne illnesses being prevented by the pasteurization process, and fluoride in drinking water has caused a dramatic decrease in cavities since 1945. And of course, that's not to also disregard or cast away the conversation around levels. Right? But what we are now seeing is the blatant disregard and even condemnation of decades of established research, and it's exactly why these are being called anti-science laws. Right? And the growing spread of these anti-science laws has prompted serious concern in many experts, including Devin Burghardt, with Devin being the president and executive director of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, saying, "The march of conspiracy thinking from the margins to the mainstream, now guiding public policy, should be a wake-up call for all Americans. People are literally going to die from it as a result." With this being legislation being turned into law, I mean, we're starting to see states funnel taxpayer money into what's being fueled largely by conspiracy theories. And some of the things that you're seeing is, like in Florida, for example, it was just announced that part of their research money is going to go towards funding the study of ivermectin as a cancer treatment option. Right? And that despite the fact that oncologists and medical experts say there isn't evidence that ivermectin is effective to treat cancer in humans yet. Right? And ivermectin, it became a huge talking point during the pandemic, with the driving voice behind it at the time being Joe Rogan. And actually now the continued discussion about it, this time in reference to cancer, can also be attributed to Rogan. I mean, you literally had Governor DeSantis's wife saying, "Mel Gibson was on Joe Rogan's podcast and he was talking about people that he was friends with and they overcame stage 4 cancer. We should look at it. We should look at the benefits of it. We shouldn't just speculate and guess." Right? The episode that she's referring to there got nearly 12 million views on YouTube and countless more in clips across the internet. And that is, if you don't know, Gibson's become kind of a big name among fringe medical groups and social media influencers touting ivermectin as a cancer treatment. And there I'll say, well, there have been some studies showing that ivermectin could maybe have anti-cancer effects. You've got experts saying that it is very far off from the grand cure claims that are being made. And so you've got oncologists questioning whether or not this is a reasonable use of Florida taxpayer dollars in light of other public health priorities. Right? With, for example, Otis Brawley, a professor of oncology at Johns Hopkins University, saying, "The shame is there are probably 3 dozen compounds that I can name right now that have scientific reason why we think they might be useful in the treatment of cancer, and we do not have the money to do the research to assess those drugs." Or with the mindset being, because ivermectin is such a big part of the conversations that are being pushed, it's getting more focused despite probably not being the best option. But hey, all that said, the kind of long and short of it is there's just a lot more going on than I think a lot of people realize. And then there's more news we're going to dive into in a minute, but first let me say, fall's here. Sweaters, football, and pretending we love the taste of pumpkin in literally everything. And as the air, it's cooling off, my schedule's not. And it's one of the reasons I'm leaning on HelloFresh, today's sponsor and America's #1 choice for home cooking. At HelloFresh, they've doubled their menu with over 100 meal options every week. We're talking heartier portions, new global recipes, and seasonal dishes designed by actual chefs. And the food, fresh, high protein, and loaded with seasonal produce and 2 or more veggies per meal. So you can pretend that you're being healthy while devouring something that actually tastes great. I mean, 91% of customers say they feel healthier eating HelloFresh, and 9 out of 10 say dinner's more delicious. And I mean, they have steak and seafood recipes every week at no extra cost, with 3 times more seafood options than before. And again, that's steak, seafood, no extra cost. It's awesome. Also, this is a me thing. I appreciate that everything comes pre-measured. It makes me feel like I actually know what I'm doing. It's a main thing. HelloFresh is my move. I think you should try it too, especially because the best way to cook just got better. So go to HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM or scan the QR code now to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life. That's 1 per box with active subscription, and free meals applied as discount on the first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. But then next up in the news, Donald Trump wants to pay himself $230 million with taxpayer money. And specifically, he's demanding that the Justice Department pay him that amount as compensation for criminally investigating him in the past. And the people who get to decide whether or not he gets that money, they're some of his closest allies and only now have their jobs because of him. But with that said, this all goes back to before Donald Trump became president again. yet, when he reportedly submitted 2 complaints known as administrative claims. So those are technically not lawsuits, but if the Justice Department rejects one, the person who filed the claim will often then decide to bring a lawsuit. Though in this case, it seems unlikely to come to that. But as far as the details, Trump submitted the first claim in late 2023, seeking damages for a number of reported violations of his rights, including the FBI and Special Counsel investigation into Russian election meddling and alleged connections to his 2016 campaign. He then submitted the second complaint in the summer of 2024, accusing the FBI of violating his privacy by searching Mar-a-Lago for classified documents 2 years early. And he also accused the DOJ of engaging in what he called malicious prosecution by charging him with mishandling those records after he left office. But of course now the DOJ is Trump's DOJ. And according to the department's manual, settlements of claims of more than $4 million must be approved by the Deputy Attorney General or Associate Attorney General. And the current Deputy Attorney General is Todd Blanche, who, if you do not know, not only served as Trump's lead criminal defense lawyer, but also said at his confirmation hearing that his attorney-client relationship with Trump wasn't ending. And then the person who would be considered the current Associate Attorney General, that is the chief of the department's civil division, Stanley Woodward Jr., and he represented Trump's co-defendant in the classified documents case, and he also represented a number of other Trump allies, including current FBI Director Kash Patel. But despite all that, the history and the connection, a Justice Department spokesperson reportedly would not say whether Blanche or Woodward would recuse themselves from overseeing the case, saying instead, in any circumstance, all officials of the Department of Justice follow the guidance of career ethics officials. However, big thing, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she fired the department's top ethics advisor back in July. And so now you've got people like one ethics professor at Pace University saying, what a travesty. The ethical conflict is just so basic and fundamental, you don't need a law professor to explain it. And then adding, and then to have people in the Justice Department decide whether his claim should be successful or not, and these are the people who serve him deciding whether he wins or loses. It's bizarre and almost too outlandish to believe. And with all of this, you have Trump, if not giving specifics, at least acknowledging his claims for compensation, saying,
I don't know what the numbers are. I don't even talk to them about it. All I know is that they would owe me a lot of money, but I'm not looking for money. I'd give it to charity or something. I would give it to charity, any money. But look, what they did, they rigged the election. And as you know, we had, in one case, 60 Minutes had to pay us a lot of money. George Slavadopoulos had to pay us a lot of money, and they already paid. They paid me a lot of money because what they did was wrong.
But then also, in addition to that, he seemingly acknowledged the inherent conflict of interest here, even admitting that it would ultimately be his decision.
Now, with the country, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the decision, right? And, that decision would have to go across my desk. And it's awfully strange to make a decision where I'm paying myself. In other words, did you ever have one of those cases where you have to decide how much you're paying yourself in damages? But I